Dear students, after the discussion of the burnout and the casting of removable bashar denture last week, today's lecture we will continue discussing the finishing and polishing of this removable bashar denture metal framework. Finishing. Finishing is the process of smoothing and trimming prostheses before final polish, or the entire procedure of smoothing and polishing regarding any material made from different types, like in the metal, resins, polymers, and so on. While the polishing, it is the process of making denture or casting smooth and glossy. Now, the aims of the finishing and polishing that to improve aesthetic function and oral health, of course. Now, the finishing and the polishing, the rules for finishing, the casting, and then the polishing is in terms of the rules for finishing is the high speed are preferable to low speeds. Not only are they effective, but in experienced hand, that is less danger of the casting being caught and thrown out of the hands by the rotating instruments. Now, the wheel or points and the speed of their rotations, whether you are using handpiece or, for example, the lathe machine, they should do the cutting. Now, the excessive pressure heats the work as the processing, the finishing in a metal framework. So, any pressure exerted on the piece, this will exert high pressure with high heat. Crushes the abrasive particles, causes the wheel to clutch and glaze, and slows the cuttings. Now, the most favorable way to cut, for example, cutting the sprues in terms of the first step, is using cutting burr in terms of low speed and gentle cutting. High speed will generate heats for the metal, regardless you are holding it manually or using the forceps. Now, a definite squeeze for finishing should be adopted and allowed for every framework. Clean polishing wheels should be used, as every time probably may we use different metal in terms of cobalt chromium, gold alloy, nickel chromium. So the polishing wheels should be clean. If it is contaminated, in terms of maybe you are using different material to be polished, so you should have a specific tools to polish the metals and specific tools to polish the polymers or resins. If contaminated wheels are used, foam particles may become embedded in the surface of the framework, which will lead to later discoloration, and this affects also the bonding with the acrylic and in terms of defects. The technician should be sure that each finishing operation completely removes all scratches left by the preceding one. That's mean if we are finishing the framework using stone burr, so the other tool should be stone burr with the fine particles to produce a finer and surface with to remove all the scratches left by the one have been used previously. The technician should be remembered that each successive finishing step uses a finer abrasive and therefore cuts more slowly and requires more time to accomplish. So the finishing you should not force the finishing. You should done it gently and with the proper tools and consequence steps. The equipments necessary for polishing consist of stones, separating discs, finishing burrs, rubber abrasive wheels, small felt wheels, and polishing wheels for pumice, tripoli, and rouge, of course. And each type of the rouges depend on the type of the metal that we are using. Now, finishing and polishing procedures. After the procedure generally, after the finishing of the casting and the cooling of the ring cast overnight or with enough time to cool the refractory with the casting material, the investment then removed using whether manual or electrical hammer to remove the investment surrounding the casting, and the investment near to the casting is removed. Use a sandblasting. We've discussed that with the casting procedure, the last point. Now, with the starting with the finishing, we should remove all the investment material, the generally with electrical or manual hammer. However, the investment material that attached to the framework, metal framework, should be removed using sandblasting machine with a different size of aluminum oxide, and this is depend from 100 to 50 micrometer grit size aluminum oxide material or powder. Now, a separating disc is used to remove the sprue, of course. Then they are cut as close as possible to the framework without nicking it. This to give us enough space for the finishing to the sprue size of the framework. A perforated disc is used for effective removal of the sprue ends on the casting after separation, and this to give a delicate finishing procedure without pitting the framework itself. Now, pliers should never be used to remove partial denture sprues. This will distort the framework. Using the cutter to press it, this will lead to press the framework as well from the other side, and this will lead to distort the dimension of the framework or the side of the metal close to the framework, that part of the sprue. Now, the casting is pickled after the sprue stamped or removed, and the pickling is the framework is placed in pickling solution, and the solution is heated. Never heat from plunge a framework or a temper will be lost. This technique called electrolyte polishing, and this is after sandblasting the framework. This to remove all the attached or oxides layer attached to the framework to expose the framework. Pickling removes surface oxide from the metal and is best done with a commercial pickling solution, of course. Strong acid may be used, but it may be produce harmful vapors that mean leading to distortion the surface of the framework. The basic principle of the polishing is to remove scratches with finer scratches until the final stages when an amorphous layer is formed on the surface by the action of the finer polishing agent. Now, the polishing is the same as with the procedure with the polymers material, but still the tools and the felt wheels are different. The polishing steps are completed sequentially over the entire polished surface. This prevents repetition of polish. This illustration shows the stages of polishing metals in terms of, first of all, a surface after it has been stoned, the surface then using a rubber abrasive wheel to polish it, then the surface of the framework were pumice, and the surface then polished using tripoly, and the luster achieved also by using champion's puff. So the tools are using the used to polish is essential here. Now, after the sprues are removed, the stumps are reduced with a coarse stone, then may be done with a handpiece, of course, as we noticed here in this image. Now, the surface is smooth using a fine stone, and then any flash or irregularity is removed during this step. The framework has been contoured using the fine stone. Note that the plastic retention areas do not require finishing. That's mean the saddle area here. We do not need to finish or polish these, except with opening the holes using Fisher Bear to give enough retention, because we are going to the material, the adhesion of the acrylic later on. The adhesion of the acrylic with the denture teeth will be on them. So we don't need to highly finished or highly polished, only to expose the opening in terms of some flowing of the material during the casting. The then actually the framework is smoothed using a rubber abrasive wheel, a rubber abrasive points, reach less accessible area. Do not touch the internal surface, as this is smooth and we don't need to change the dimension. Then a brush wheel with the wet palm is used to refine the framework. Well, actually, the rag wheel with the Tripoli also is used to improve the high polish to the framework, and of course the polished surface. That means the exposed major connector, the clasps, the direct and indirect retainers as well. The less accessible area are polished with a small felt wheel and Tripoli to avoid high pressure with it, which lead to for example fracture, for example in term of the angles for the RBI clasp or any other clasps, because otherwise this will lead to strain and stress, the stress and the strain of the clasp, leading to high pressure and probably distort the dimension, the cross section of the clasp. The After this step, the framework is washed thoroughly using detergent and hot water, of course, and of course, do not exert the temperature of the high temperature water, because still we use a warm water. Note that throughout the finishing steps, larger polishing wheel are used first, followed by smaller wheel and point wheel, of course. This is the sequence time. Otherwise, you may fail in proper finishing and polishing the framework. Now, rouge on the champions puff produce a high gloss on the surface of the metal. Rouge is used for several minutes and with moderate pressure to produce a proper luster, a shine surface, and probably for the major connector in aiding the patient to keep appliance clean. Now, note that the surface has a higher luster with a reflect high light eventually, and then the light will be reflect evenly. The tissue surface of the lingual bar has been polished. You should double check all the surfaces of the mandibular and maxillary major connectors, the very little metals to be removed in terms of improper excess due to cutting of the sprues near the shoulder area. The IBR should be well polished, finished and polished, and the tissue surface of the maxillary partial is finished with the wet pomace only, and triboli. Do not over polish it. Another stone or rubber will to avoid loss of intimate tissue contact there. Do not use them. Only the wet pomace with a tripoli and rouge, just gently. And sometimes we prefer only the pickling procedure and the polishing to and do not touch the tissue surface in terms of perfect framework. The complete framework then returned to the master cast and then the procedure later on take it to take the wax part and duplicating them to produce a framework made of remove partial denture and to replace the teeth later on. Do not forget that the pickling or electrolyte polishing, it is essential to know what the type of the metal that you are using, and what the type of the acid, and whether which part in the anode and the cathode part, to remove all the debris and the oxide layers in the polishing procedures. Uh, all these steps before trying the framework in the patient mouth, and then to be fabricate or to start fabricating the remove washer denture in term of restoring the missing artificial teeth, and backing the acrylic teeth with the gingival or acrylic base in the framework. What I would like you to prefer for the next week, the quiz, is define polishing. This is what we have today, dear students, and we are looking forward for next week to discuss the guidelines to select the artificial teeth, and to restore them and remove washer denture. Take care. Thank you. See you next week.